My name is Victor. I'm officially an account executive here at Sucuri. Though it's kind of dabble in all trades here. If you ever have a question or concern about anything, if you have my contact, feel free to reach out to me. A bit more about me: if you've attended older webinars in the past, last year and whatnot, you've noticed I've done quite a few. So I try to introduce new details about myself. So keeping up with what's going on in my household. I'm a father to now two tightly bonded sons. The little one there born in January. I'm now training for a half marathon with my awesome wife, who is taking this up from couch to half marathon, which is an awesome ambition and goal. So hopefully I can get her trained up for that in February. And do not let anyone that knows me personally tell you that I turned anything but 25 this month. August is my birth month. Having said that, what are we here to learn? So in this webinar, I think Nikki described it best, right? We're trying to talk about things outside of website security, which is what Sucuri does. So some of the topics we're going to be touching on will be, security as it pertains to everyday devices you connect through at your house, on the road, just things that you are always connecting to, but never really thinking through security-wise. We'll also touch on multi-factor authentication. Most people commonly know that as 2FA, but there are, of course, ways you can add on additional layers of authentication and security, and online account management, right? And we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So who would this pertain to? Well, it's 2019, so everybody. Everybody's got some laptop, some tablet, some mobile device, something that connects them online, right? So whether it's you, your mom, your grandmother, somebody is always carrying some kind of device to stay online, whether it's for social media purposes, whether it's for business, you're all connecting online somehow. So we're all connecting online, though, primarily to do what? To access a website, which, we've kind of gone through a bit over the year about how best to secure it and whatnot. But what's the road to the website, right? How do we get there? How do we connect online? A lot of people often don't think about that path or what it takes to connect online. So hopefully I can shed some light on what that entails and what you can do along the way to help, further secure yourself, not for yourself, but for your family. So what are we connecting to? We're connecting through Wi-Fi routers, right? We're all setting that up, whether it's something we purchased ourselves, whether we're leasing through our internet provider, right? Xfinity does something similar. Then we connect from the Wi-Fi router to our desktop or our phones or our tablets or our laptops. And these are just things we take for granted, right? We're just, okay, wake up, get on my phone, go to work, connect to my desktop, get online through my Wi-Fi. So what happens within each of these components, though, security-wise, is that we're not factoring in, right? Some things that we just sort of spin up, install, and then forget about for years and years and years. So we'll focus first on Wi-Fi routers, right? It's how we connect online to begin with. When we connect, when we first get a Wi-Fi router, right, we're typically looking at something like this to get connected, right? What's the password I need to get in? What's the password I need to use to, create either my new password or whatnot? What people often don't realize is that these default passwords are terrible, right? You look at this end router here on the right, and they're using admin as their username and pass to get you into their, their configuration for the Wi-Fi. That's pretty awful. And most people don't think to change it. They just leave it, right? I mean, they leave it as admin in admin. If you know anything about security, it's just terrible, terrible security posture. So one of the things we always want to make sure when we're being conscious of is, how we're logging in, and more importantly, once we do have the Wi-Fi set up and this information, you should do your best to either block, scratch it out, tape it over, so that if somebody breaks into your house or, somebody you don't want having access in the office to look at it, after hours, doesn't take advantage of, it's already blocked off. And you should make note somewhere of that login IP or the host name, the admin password you're using, and the admin username as well. But once we log into that interface, there's a couple of things we should also be conscious about doing. right? So most people who do this regularly will recognize a panel like this. One of the first things you should do, of course, is change your password from either admin or password. My in-laws, as an example, use password for their Wi-Fi router. It's password, and it drives me crazy, but can't convince everybody to make technical changes that way. So make sure it follows the same methodology that we practice here, right? That it's complex, that it's long and unique from other passwords you're using. It's not being shared amongst different platforms or whatnot. So very critical, and if possible, change it every now and again. And of course, basic principles, keep it hidden. It's not like, out on the coffee table for everyone to see, only distribute to people who should have access to the Wi-Fi. So what are other best practices when it comes to your Wi-Fi? Well, changing your network name, or otherwise known as your SSID. Essentially what this is when you log on, let's say your phone, and you go to Starbucks, and you're trying to connect to their Wi-Fi, you may see Starbucks Wi-Fi. That's the SSID designated to their Wi-Fi router. Of course, that makes it very easy to pinpoint that it belongs to Starbucks, which is fine for them. For your home, maybe not so much. You might want to keep it something slightly more encrypted, or otherwise just doesn't give away exactly who you are. Last thing you want is if, a bit of an extreme, but if someone's targeting you specifically, they're not driving around the general neighborhood and then looking for your last name, like looking for Santoyo Wi-Fi, you won't find here, right? We have a very random generation of a name for our Wi-Fi. Next thing is, of course, updating it. The Wi-Fi firmware, as it's known, does require updates from time to time. And much like anything else, probably includes some security related updates as well. So you don't have to log into this every day. At least once a month, every couple of months. But at least as long as you're checking in to make sure your Wi-Fi firmware is up to date to prevent exploits of attacks through internet connected devices. If you're in the industry or aware, Wi-Fi routers can be used for distributing attacks. You want to make sure you're up to date on that. Using WPA2 encryption. This is the encryption method utilized when you're using passkeys and passwords and whatnot. This is important. You want to use this by default if it's not already there, because this is the latest in the encryption standard. If you're using anything else, it's not as renowned or dependable. So if you can, make sure that you're utilizing this method instead. And of course, limit access when you're away. And this is interesting. People don't think about this. Like, if you're going to go on vacation for 3 weeks, people just sort of leave their Wi-Fi running 24/7. Well, no one's going to be at the house for 3 weeks, or if you're going to take off the office for a week, you might as well either just unplug the router altogether, right? So people aren't like consuming your bandwidth in the event that you don't want to see spikes in bandwidth usage and whatnot, especially if you at home stream video, or otherwise like you have off hours. Say I'm off from 9 to 5 every day at home. I can schedule my router to just sort of disable during that time frame. Some routers are capable of doing that. So consider that. How often are you away from this device? So if you're not there, there's no real reason that it should be on. Good practice on that. Now, we've put our Wi-Fi router in the best position to succeed, so let's connect online. So what are we using to connect online, right? What vessels are we choosing? So let's first think about traditional desktops, right? We have our Windows and our Mac operating systems, right? So as we go through this, I will touch on topics in general, and I'll include guidance on the left and right for each platform. Of course, they may vary based on what device you're using, but the general idea is something we kind of want to harp on, and at least general guidance on where you can find it within your system settings. So first things first, your timeouts, logging in after that timeout, right? So it seems like a dumb thing to go over and over, but strong passwords should always be encouraged when you're logging onto your desktop, right? Make sure you're changing it at minimum every 6 months, or at the very least, every 3 to 4 months, to make sure that you're properly secured there. If you are off, you're one to always walk away from the machine because you have things to do or meetings to attend. A screensaver with a short inactivity timeout period is definitely encouraged, especially if you're handling sensitive data, right? Like You don't know how often it may take to grab a coffee. You get distracted into a conversation with a coworker, and then someone might walk by your desk, and you've got all kinds of credit card data information in front. If you don't have an inactivity period where your screen goes blank, that's kind of a big no-no. So one thing I recommend is 2 minutes or less, if possible, and of course, logging back in should require use of that strong password that you should have ideally set up. Secondly, of course, as well as removing unwanted programs. If you've heard me speak at events or previous webinars, you've heard me use a phrase, if you don't use it, lose it. Same should go for the software on your machines. So there's a lot of stuff that comes pre-installed, especially on tablets and phones. Some people call it bloatware. Whatever you call it, there's just certain applications or software that you may not actually use. So I would say if you have the time, go through what you have, research online to see whether it's actually necessary to what you're doing or what you need it for, or if it's something you can safely remove. And if you can, do so. As I mentioned on the left and right, Mac and Windows have different ways of uninstalling these programs. Of course, we'll be sharing these slides after. I won't go through these specific steps, but do take the time. If you really don't need to use a program, lose it. Therefore, if you're connecting online, it's a less likelihood that something like that could get exploited if particular malware viruses get on your computer. Third is enabling what are already built-in security measures. Really straightforward, guys. It's, you've got your Windows firewall, your Mac firewalls. On Mac in particular, it's really easy. You just go right into that panel you see there, security privacy, and you just turn on firewall. And that's it. It takes you 10 seconds. You could probably even do it while I'm describing this to you. So do that. It helps the more layers of security you have, through your browsing experience online, the better it'll be for you. And of course, cover up your webcam if possible. More applicable if you're using your tablets or your laptops, of course. There is malware that is known to, record, take pictures without you ever knowing. The light will not turn on, it just records anyway, and you would never be the wiser if your webcam was running. If you found us at an event and have seen it, we know that we distribute these malware, webcam covers. Plug. We're actually going to be at Inbound this year in Boston in a couple of weeks at the first week of September. If you're going to be in the area or are attending Inbound 2019, we'll be at booth S20 for those who want to stop by and say hello or pick up one of these webcam covers. So just something you want to make sure you're doing if you're not already. I've heard other means, electrical tape, band-aids, or whatever for the interim, but if you can get your hands on one of these, which are available in stores, I would definitely recommend doing so. So, of course, the desktops and laptops are not the only way we connect online. I imagine everybody on this webinar is connected through their phone to some way, or even watching this on their phone. And that's just 2019. It's where we are. And as important as it is to secure our Wi-Fi router and our desktop, our mobile devices are also something we need to be very conscious of. So, what are the things we need to worry about with our Androids or iPhones? Unlocking it, of course, right? Some people just do a swipe up, and that's it. Don't recommend. If you can at least do a PIN, or even better, using what we call biometric, unlocking. So whether it's your fingerprints, some more recent phones can do like ocular scanning or face recognition, whatever it is that can personally identify you as a person unlocking your phone is what you should be doing. So in your iOS and Android settings, you have it there. I use my thumb as a fingerprint to authorize stuff, to unlock my screen, unlock my phone. So definitely would encourage using what's known as biometric unlocking as often as possible. In addition, the lock screen timeout, we talked about this on your desktops. Same thing goes for your phones. I might set my phone down to go pick up what's going to be my food order at Panera or whatever. And if I didn't think to, let's say, close off my phone and go dark, I might have sensitive information or sensitive emails that are passing through. If a bystander walks past and reads something really critical or important, then I didn't do a good job of making sure I had a proper screen timeout. That's on me. So anything within a minute I think it's fair, depending on your industry and what you're working with, even less so. If you're using something like a fingerprint unlock, it's not that inconvenient to just have to use your thumbprint every time to unlock your phone, right? We're talking security versus convenience. And if you're constantly working with sensitive data or information, definitely consider how limited your phone remains on when you're stepping away inadvertently, right? I have kids. I forget to leave my phone everywhere all the time. It's just human nature. Hiding notifications. So not so much the notification itself, but what's the information in the notification, right? So we all get flooded with notifications at nauseum at times. What's important is if we are handling sensitive information or just things we don't want people to know about, that we don't show what's the content of that, right? So Gmail can tell me I have a number of notifications, but it won't actually show me like a preview what that content is. You have certain ways you can do that. Left on Android is a bit more explicit there. You can hide the contents while the notifications remain on. Good security practice, right? Because you just never know who's looking or who's trying to steal your phone in the middle of a subway or whatnot. So just another good security suggestion for your phone. Software updates, go through this briefly. We talk about this all the time. Same with your website, the same with your computer. Keep up with updates. And for your apps as well. You never know what security specific updates are included to maybe further help, or prevent, data breaches and whatnot. So the more up to date you are on software, the better positioned you will be. Network housekeeping. This applies to your desktops and your laptops as well. I just kept it here because it's easier to sort of go through in one section. We all connect remotely and travel a lot. And because of that, we have to connect through a lot of different hotspots. So I might be going through the Denver airport to connect to their Wi-Fi, coffee shop Wi-Fi, Barnes and Noble, you name it. If it can be sometimes an indication of where we travel and how often we are at a certain place. So one thing I would recommend is if you go somewhere even temporarily, and let's say you make no more use of the hotel Wi-Fi you connected to, I would delete that from your history. Primarily because if someone were to get your hands on your phone, as an example, and they were to go through how many different, hotels you've stayed at, it can just be another crumb to, unlocking sensitive information about yourself. So anything that just provides less of an indication of where you've been is just always in your best interest, right? It's really easy, especially like here on your MacBook, you can just literally just click a Wi-Fi, hit the minus, just delete it. So have a similar approach on your phone. So if you have a time, just waiting in line somewhere, go through your networks, see where you've been. You'd be surprised that, hey, I connected to that hotel Wi-Fi 4 years ago. Probably don't anticipate doing that again, so you can delete that off your phone. So we've made it to the browser, right? So we've secured the Wi-Fi router, or we've chosen our vessel, whether it's our desktop, whether it's our phone, and we're going to connect that line to a website, right? So we're going to, in this example, we'll go 5by5.com.au. So while we're going to this website, though, we still have to consider some of the things we're connecting through on our browser to ensure that we're safe there as well. So what are some of the things that we can do in terms of, let's say, logging into our website or seeing information or whatever the case is? Well, first things first is making sure that we're always instilling this principle of strong passwords. And whether it's connecting to Facebook or going to Amazon to buy something or getting on, Salesforce for work purposes or whatever it is that we're doing, we got to make sure that we're using strong, long, complex, and unique passwords for each and every one of these access points. I'm going to use LastPass as an example here, primarily because I use it. It's not to speak ill of any other ones. So I know that KeyPass is another prominently well-used one. I'm just very familiar with LastPass, so this is the example I'll be using. Now, password managers are really awesome because they help in just making the generation of the passwords easier. You'll notice on the right-hand side, you can even dictate what the length is, how many factors you're using to create these passwords. I use 16-character passwords for my own purposes. And from there, you can just log into your main LastPass accounts, create your own master password that unlocks them all. What does this do for you? It means you only need to remember your master password. So it's one password you need to remember. And you can have access to several dozen others that you don't have to. It makes it really easy. It's also available on mobile, and that way you can also take that same security experience from your browser to your phone. And it's just something really easy, I think, for everybody to use. And I think if you're using something like this already, great. I'll also touch on some password management cleanup we can do later on in this presentation. Next thing is, of course, two-factor authentication. For those that don't know, and if you don't, please take this seriously. If you do, great. Try to enable 2FA where you can, right? A strong password won't always be sufficient. Sometimes a second layer, whether it's receiving some temporary one-time code on your phone via text, whether it's using some type of tool like Google Authenticator to log online, something that'll tie to another device of yours, right, to ensure that it is you accessing these sites, will further sort of spotlight the potential of people trying to compromise your accounts. My wife and I often enough get emails, say from Dropbox or Amazon or Instagram saying, hey, here is your token to reset your password. We never did that. And so we know that someone's trying to get in. Of course, they won't be able to because we're getting some type of verification on our phones to validate those requests. If we didn't, someone might have already compromised those accounts for us. So try to use it. Google Authenticator is really cool, and it's really easy to use if you're not already. In addition, actually, two-factor is also used to keep up with your LastPass. So when you, let's say, log on to a new browser or set up a new computer, you can set up 2FA on LastPass as well to even further authenticate that it is you trying to access this, master library of passwords. Last thing I'll touch on is our online account inventory management. This sounds complicated, but the principle is actually really straightforward. So biggest thing is just ensuring that you're deleting information where it is possible. And oftentimes that comes in the form of old accounts we forget ever created. I can still vaguely remember that I used LiveJournal, maybe even DeadJournal for people who are old enough. And so what that means though is I may not have remembered those, either delete that account or otherwise update my password in a very long time. So one of the things you want to make sure you're doing is that if you don't use it, lose it. You can use that same philosophy for online accounts. And so one of the things you want to make sure to do if you can is either go online and search for your username. If it's unique enough, you might end up seeing it pop up in search results. Look through your old emails to just see where you've logged into or gotten updates from. If you're getting updates from somewhere, you probably logged in somewhere. If you're using LastPass or KeePass, go through your entire inventory to see what you have there. As an example, actually, a recent cleanup I did for myself was making sure that I went through all of my existing stuff. So I had like 53 passwords. I needed some major updating over 103 accounts. And as I was doing my cleanup, I realized I did not need nearly 20 of those accounts. So I just killed it or went online and deleted those accounts outright. And I'm in a much better position now than I was before I did this, the summer purge. So just something to keep in mind. One thing I'll highlight, actually going back to the previous slide, is using something like haveibeenpwned.com as an online resource. It's actually really good because it'll also give you an indication if your email may have been potentially compromised in a data breach, which we read about pretty often in the news. So if you see that pop up on your results, you know to hit those accounts first, whether it's delete them or just create a new password, enable 2FA. You have your action items here. So whatever you can do to further, ensure that your online presence is secure away from the website will always be important. A quote that Apple's CEO Tim Cook put was, if you put a key under the mat for the cops, a burglar can find it too. And criminals are using every technology tool at their disposal to hack into people's accounts. And if they know there's a key hidden somewhere, they won't stop until they find it. Data is a major commodity these days. You see it all the time with all types of manner of breaches, whether it's through Capital One, through Target. Why? Because that's access to your financial information, to funds or means to exploit, or whatever the malicious intent is. So your data is out there everywhere, and it's ultimately really your responsibility as well to ensure that either, hey, if you no longer have an account with Capital One or no longer using anything at Old Navy and you have a stored credit card on there, you should probably delete the account because someone who can hack into, say, your Old Navy account could just start buying all kinds of stuff and putting all kinds of charges on your pre-saved card. Consider that, right? If you know you're no longer using some type of online account, lose it. Having said that, definitely encourage going to our blog to stay ahead of all security threats. I know we focus on websites and web application security, but we do dabble on other things as well, as is evident in this webinar. So hopefully you can follow the blog and keep up with the latest news. But otherwise, thank you for the time, and I'm sure there's some questions in the chats that have come through. Otherwise, tweet us, use the hashtag. Nick, let me know what's going on.
Oh, yeah, we have some questions. So let's see here. I think this was from the beginning, earlier when you were talking about passwords.
Mm-hmm.
And they were Warren was actually asking, has a few questions, but is it so important to change the username as well, or not so much?
It can be, in particular, because I think a lot of attackers may identify patterns. So I don't use this password, so I feel better about using this. But if you were to use vsantoyo@gmail.com, it can be an indicator that vsantoyo is what I'm typically using for my user IDs. So then I may start testing that username against other online accounts to see if that will produce some type of results. So I would definitely say if it's somewhere where, especially like personal devices or whatnot, or really secure accounts, try to keep your usernames also unique. I'm not saying something completely different than who you are. You could use, vSantoyo with a different string, or use special characters, periods, things like that. But definitely try to think through about what is something that'll at least identify you, or at least also offer less of an indication of a trend of what you're using.
Okay, so I have to change that up now. Mine always has my email, so I'm like, okay. Let's see. Also, is hidden SSID recommended? Do you know about that?
Yes, it can be, because what that means, for those that don't know, is that basically your network remains hidden from public view, and you're only inviting specific devices if you allow it, right? So you basically whitelist, I'd say, somebody's phone or somebody's laptop. At an office setting, definitely recommended, because that way, if you know you're going to be working with 20 employees, you should only be allowing 20 desktops and 20 phones at max, right? It's a good way to keep management through your router settings, because you can then check how many active devices are connected. So for those that are paranoid, it's a good tactic to use, definitely. At home, maybe not so much, because you're going to have family over who may not understand the depths of this stuff, so you can just keep it public. But if you're in a work environment, I would recommend doing something like that.
Okay, good to know. I actually get this question too. I think a lot of people, I guess they're not sure with firewalls.
Mhm.
So do like Windows and Mac do it automatically? And it's like a firewall you have to do like for websites. We always say that, but you know.
So yeah, there's definitely differences. The topic about firewalls and what it covers it's a big topic, right? So
Hmm.
for the purposes of that question, we're talking about the firewall that protects your laptop, right? So let's say your
Yes.
MacBook Pro. It does not come enabled by default. So you need to go in there, you need to actually enable it. So if you have the chance now, check it through, your security settings, and enable it. There's no further thing needed besides just, I think, verifying your password or your fingerprints if you use a fingerprint to log onto your MacBook. But yeah, it does not come enabled by default, or you can always check to see what default settings are set up. Um, that's another principle as well when it comes to websites. For those that have heard me talk, default settings are always the best settings. So if you have a chance, review it, your computer, your tablets, and make sure that you have something set up in there already.
Okay. Gosh, are we okay on time? Are you good? Because we have
Okay,
several questions.
go for it. I got no time. It's all good.
Okay.
I haven't done a
Okay.
lot today.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, well, you talked about the webcam and when we're going to be inbound.
Yep.
And we have our little webcams, but does it matter? Like, is there anything we should recommend for mobile and tablet?
Well, tablets are easier to use. Like the type of webcam covers we have, it's just like a
Mm-hmm.
sticky back, and then you place it there, and then the piece basically slides left or right to cover the webcam. As for phones, it's a little trickier. There are some protectors of the phone itself for like drop purposes, but that also include like a cover piece that'll like protect your camera as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're a little more expensive, of course. Don't I'm not saying you guys need to break the bank to do something like this, but I mean, if you're a social media person, maybe not the most practical thing because you're always going to need to have, let's say, instant access to your camera and whatnot. But for those that either are concerned or whatnot, there are some like additional add-on pieces that kind of hold onto your phone as more protective purposes, but they can also cover your camera.
Okay, good to know. And you also mentioned, oh, the I have been pawned. Is there any other website you can think of or that do that?
Um, I'm sure there's a list, and I think probably without spending too much time racking my mind about it, I can include that in the Q&A, the transcripts. I'll include a
Yes.
couple of examples of good ones. And I will also include for those who are going to download the presentation. There's actually a good online tool. I wish I'd remembered it. Is what it'll do is grade your password use, rather your
Oh,
password choice. And so what it'll do is you could just submit the password. If you're not using a random generator like LastPass or whatever, if you're trying to think of like a password you'll remember, you can use this site to basically type it in, and it'll tell you an estimate of how long they suspect hackers will take to crack that password. For example, my master password on LastPass, I remember would take 4 billion years for any automated tool to crack, which is really ideal, right? Like so, and then the color will change in the screen. So like the more safe it is, the more it'll change from red to green. It's really cool. So I'll share that in the Q&A as well.
yeah, I want to know that one.
Yeah, sure.
Should you specify certain MAC addresses as acceptable and block others, like all others?
You don't need to block others unless you have a disgruntled employee type situation. If or you're concerned about a specific, let's say, phone doing damage to your home or office or whatever, that's probably a little extreme. Whitelisting, though, it's good practice, mainly because, especially if you're in an office setting, it can also prevent issues like not being able to connect online. You know, heaven forbid somebody messes around with the configuration of your Wi-Fi or your modem or router. But that's a good tactic to use. Some may allow you to name those MAC address devices, which is also good reference, for example, tracking, employees who sign on and sign off and whatnot. So it could work. It just depends on your needs, realistically.
Okay. Let's see. Are there any programs that it's anonymous person, can run on a PC to find out if I have been hacked or compromised?
Antivirus software will typically be good for that. And there are a number that are out there. People know them, like Norton and Avast and some other stuff. I would say that, if you have an existing antivirus software, run it. There's some that do require like a subscription fee that may go more in depth, which can be worth it if you're really concerned. I think another tool I would recommend for the purposes of going through your software inventory, if you don't, if you're not too comfortable, let's say on Mac, going through all the screens and trying to track everything, is CCleaner. CCleaner is free. There's a premium model, but the free version does let you sort of go through your inventory when you go through a clean, which also like flush your cache and a number of other things. So it gives you good visibility there. But in terms of actually addressing potential malware or viruses on your computer, traditional antiviruses should do a good job of that.
Oh, okay. All right. And a few more. People are interested in the password accounts. Is there anywhere to get those detailed stats you showed?
So yeah, LastPass, it's called their security assessments. They grade you. They give you like what percentile you fit in based on like all these parameters you hit. Like you get deducted if you don't enable 2FA at some point, or even 2FA
Hmm.
with LastPass. I think what I'll do is share probably like the LastPass knowledge base article for exactly how to do that.
Okay.
The cool thing about that assessment is that first, it'll tell you how long ago you've changed the password. Some sites allow for auto changing, so you can literally just run the assessment, click some sites to auto change the password, and you can just work on something else while it's just
Oh,
changing a bunch of passwords, which is really cool. Some don't, but at least it gives you sort of like a understanding of like, okay, you have this many passwords out of date. You have certain passwords that are duplicated, right? Which can be an indication of an issue. So it's a really interesting way of judging your password inventory.
okay. We can do that after this. That's good. Are there any programs you would suggest to remove right away? They don't
Um,
know which one should stay on the laptop and which one
sure.
should like has to stay.
That's a tougher one. I mean, I think this goes to everyday mindset, right? Like if you go through your program list, let's say if you go to Windows, your start menu, and you go through all your software, I mean, if there's something you don't even recognize, you probably don't need it. It could be benign. It could just be like an art related thing
Hmm.
or whatever. But ultimately, if you don't even recognize it and you've had your computer for 5 years, you're likely not going to use it in the next five either. So just any, I mean, look, also beyond security, it also performance because a lot of these programs are really heavy, take up a lot of space, disk space in specific. So not only could it help in your security posture, but also you might be surprised to see how much of a performance boost you may get from your computer just removing like 10, 20 programs you never use.
Oh, wow. That's true.
Yeah.
Gosh, got so much to do.
Same thing happens on my phone. Like I have like all like social media stuff I thought I was gonna use and I never do. And
Hmm.
so like just deleting like 10 apps all of a sudden like, oh yeah, Twitter's connecting twice as fast today. Uh
Yep.
yeah, so
We can all be better, that's for sure.
yeah, for sure.
Let's see. And they're hearing about browser plugins that block ads on their browser that can install malware. Are there reliable ones out there?
There are good ones, especially ones that let's say block JavaScript by default for those that are security conscious. So those are really good ones. Anything that do that. Um, there's a lot. We have a post actually. I think we did ones that talks on a few that are really good. So I think that'll be better for follow up. So I can just list them for you guys, and you can link to those
Okay.
particular plugins or add-ons anyway. So, but there are some good ones. But if you can block Flash or JavaScript by default, it's a good starting point. And then allow wherever you need it.
Okay. Okay. So I see you're going to have to add a lot of stuff after this. A
All
lot
good.
of links, a
It's all
lot
good.
of info. We're relying on you, Victor. So oh, I forgot about this last one. It was when you were talking about the SSID, hidden
Mhm.
SSIDs. Um, they're saying it's hidden SSID. Can they find like by hacker tools? Is there like something with hackers?
There may be, and there's certainly ways that can happen, and I won't go down the rabbit hole too
Mm,
far about other things that can happen as just like using your own home Wi-Fi.
mhm.
Um, I would say that just you're never going to completely eliminate the risk that you may get exposed or targeted anyway. The main driving thing here is that you're putting yourself in the best position possible, right?
Right.
You're disguising or rather hiding your SSID may not eliminate the most advanced attackers out there, but at the very least, you're going to eliminate a lot of novices or people that are just trying to bother you on the day to day. If they can't find you, that's fine. Because at the end of the day,
Okay.
maybe those are the only types of people that come to bug. If you can hide yourselves from them, great. Advanced attackers, if they're really that proficient in this kind of stuff, I mean, there's oftentimes little you can do. I mean, let's face it, when you have banks and Capital One and Target, susceptible to these things themselves, um, don't don't feel too burdened to try and like keep up with those standards, right? Just do what you can,
Mm-mm.
and if disguising your SSID is something that's easy for you to do and you know how to do it, switch it on. Do it. It doesn't take too much effort.
I like that. That's a good ending. We do what we can, right?
Yeah, we're not perfect. We're
No, we're
gonna,
just human.
I'm sure I'm gonna forget about 10 accounts in 6 months, and I'm gonna have to go back and clean those up. But as long as we try to remember as best as possible instead of letting it sit there for 5 years, it's the best we can do.
Well, thank you so much, Victor. You've really, I think, educated, I know myself and others
Sure.
here today. So, um, as we mentioned, this is recorded. So, I believe I got to almost everybody's questions, but if I missed any, I'll definitely go through this and shoot them to Victor and he'll answer it. And the webinar itself will be with all our webinars, which are at sucuri.net/webinars. Uh, Thank you again. And oh, we have our next webinar, which is a guest presenter. It's about understanding logs and how to use them and to better manage your WordPress site. So that will be on September 10th, so just a few weeks away. And we have Robert Abella from WP White Security.
Oh, nice.
You're going to be at Inbound?
Yes.
No?
Yes, I
Okay.
will be.
Okay, so that's in early September, I believe.
Yep. First
Right?
week of September, September 2nd through the 6th, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
Boston, Massachusetts, for those that are in the area, and we'd love to see you out there.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a good day.
Likewise.